Hey guys, alright, we are returning to Kings and Generals after a very long time. This time, the fall of Constantinople, 1453, Ottoman Wars documentary. I'm gonna see how this video does. If this video does good in, like, I need it to hit certain view counts, because, you know, I kind of have to focus on that kind of stuff now to keep growing the channel. That's where we're at. The last couple times I watched Kings and Generals, they didn't necessarily hit the views in the day, but I looked back at them like a couple weeks ago, and it looked like they actually got up to view counts that they should be at. So that I want to see from them. So yeah, I'm gonna give them a shot again. Maybe they'll do better in the first day of upload. But yeah, so nothing more to say. Let's go ahead and talk about the fall of Constantinople. Let's see how well they do in explaining this. This is a 12-minute video. Fall of Constantinople is pretty complex. There's a lot to it. So yeah.
The Ottoman Empire attempted to besiege
By the way, there is a series on Netflix. It's not exactly the best source for historical information, but I still enjoyed it because the actors, the Turkish actors that they had, were phenomenal. I can't remember the title, but it does involve the fall of Constantinople and Mehmet II. He's the Sultan that conquered Constantinople, I think was his name. The actor for Mehmet, fantastic. They did a good job, at least in the acting side. Documentary side, don't really know, because it was a mix of like acting and documentary. I enjoyed it. Wasn't not that good. I don't think it was the best in terms of historicalness, but other than that, I enjoyed it.
Constantinople and end the Byzantine Empire on a half-dozen occasions, but these sieges were interrupted by the Crusades, civil wars, rebellions, and the invasion of Timur.
Oh, you know,
However,
just casual everyday Saturday
things. By the middle of the 15th century, the Ottomans consolidated their territory and finally entered a period of internal stability. The next siege of Constantinople was imminent.
Get some
In
epic music going.
1444, Sultan Murad II defeated the European Crusaders at the Battle of Varna. The King of Poland and Hungary, Władysław, was killed during the battle, and that plunged the most powerful states in Central Europe into a crisis. Still, the Ottomans faced resistance from the Albanian Lord Skanderbeg and the voivoda of Transylvania, John Hunyadi. The latter sent numerous letters to the Pope and the kings of Europe, calling them to another crusade, but since no one was willing, his activity was limited to raiding into Ottoman territory.
What a mad lad.
As Skanderbeg was previously an Ottoman vassal, Murad sent three
Pasha?
punitive expeditions.
I think Pasha is in that show that I talked about. The name sounds familiar.
Against him. But all three armies were ambushed and defeated by the outnumbered Albanian forces. Meanwhile, the Sultan was preoccupied with minor rebellions within the empire and a campaign against the Despotate of Morea in 1446. During the campaign in Greece, Murad forced the ruler of Morea and future Byzantine Emperor Constantine XI to become his vassal and pay tribute. It was time to attack Skanderbeg, and Murad won a minor victory at the Battle of Svetsk.
I like how they're adding the context here before going into the fall of Constantinople. Like talking about regional things that are happening just before the attack, before the siege.
Tigrad
I
in
think that's really
1448.
nice.
But chasing the guerrilla force under Skanderbeg was impossible, and after setting a few garrisons along the frontier, Murad returned to Edirne. Meanwhile, Hunyadi was preparing another crusade. By September of 1448, he finally raised a 30,000-strong army and started a new campaign.
That's a big army.
He was hoping that the despot of Serbia, Juraj Branković, would join him, but the latter was an Ottoman vassal and refused, so instead, Serbian lands were raided. Murad knew about all this and started moving his army to prevent Skanderbeg and Hunyadi from joining forces. Subsequent events are not clear, but it seems that in October, Hunyadi moved to the field of Kosovo to wait for Skanderbeg. Some claim that the latter was blocked by Đurađ. Others think that the local Ottoman garrison slowed the Albanian force. But in any case, on the 17th of October, the Sultan and his 50,000 troops reached the site where the First Battle of Kosovo between Lazar and Murad I took place. On the first day of the ensuing battle, Hungarian, Polish, Wallachian and Moldovan forces attacked the Ottomans across the front with their armoured troops, but despite early successes, were pushed back. Hunyadi attempted to use his light cavalry to attack the Ottoman flanks during the night, but the Ottoman light horsemen intercepted and repelled the Crusaders. On the second day, Murad ordered his flanks to retreat, and that tricked Hunyadi. His troops attacked the Ottoman centre head-on, and were able to push the Ottoman light infantry back. However, the Janissaries stopped the Crusader advance near the Sultan's position. At this point, the Ottoman flanks returned to the battle and encircled Hunyadi's forces. The leader of the crusading army managed to retreat, but more than half of his troops were killed, while the Ottomans lost around 5,000 men.
Damn.
The Battle of Kosovo sealed the fate of the Balkan people for the next few centuries. Skanderbeg continued his resistance, and a few more campaigns against him did not bring any tangible success. But the focus of the Ottomans, the road to Constantinople, was now open. When Murad II passed away, and his son Mehmed II came to power in 1451, his singular goal was to take the Byzantine capital. Constantinople was not the city it once was.
No, it wasn't.
The total number of the population was now between 50 and 100,000, and vast swathes of land within the walls were empty. And
they didn't mention it. 50 to 100,000, especially for 1453, sounds like a lot for a city. But Constantinople, I believe, was once home to over 1 million people. It was once the largest city in the world in terms of population, and I think it held that spot for a good while until the Eastern Roman Empire started to weaken and crumble. And slowly over the years, the decades and centuries, it grew less and less and less.
And even used for farming. The Byzantine Emperor Constantine XI now controlled only a small territory along the coast and had to pay tribute to the Ottoman Sultan. Mehmed signed treaties with Venice, Genoa and Hungary to ensure that they were not going to attack him. A new rebellion by the Karamanids allowed him to cross into Anatolia and consolidate his power in the region. Constantine XI was hoping to end the practice of paying tribute to the Sultan and threatened to support Mehmed's cousin Orhan in claiming the Ottoman throne. That gave Mehmed a reason to declare their previous treaty null and void. The Ottomans started preparing for war. In April of 1452, the Sultan gave orders to build a fortress called Rumeli-Hisar on the northern end of the Bosphorus to prevent any ships from assisting Constantinople from the Black Sea. The fort was built by the end of August, and Constantine had no other choice but to start bringing his subjects into the city, storing up supplies, and sending pleas for help to the European states. Only a contingent of Venetian ships and around 1,000 mercenary soldiers led by Giovanni Giustiniani arrived to help, while most Christian monarchs ignored the pleas. The Ottomans had more than 100,000 warriors, 69 cannons and 126 ships under the overall command of Mehmed II, against 7,000 professional Byzantine troops, among them 500 Ottomans of Prince Orhan, and a dozen or so cannons and 26 ships. More than 30,000 locals were pressed into service. The Byzantine and Italian ships were...
That is very, very one-sided battle.
Better than their counterparts, while their guns were outdated. One of the Ottoman guns was particularly big and would play an iconic role in the upcoming siege. Each section of the wall would be commanded by one of the Italian commanders, with Giustiniani being the leader, while Constantine and his guard were in reserve in the Blacane Palace.
Okay.
The defenders repaired the walls, and a chain was set across the Golden Horn to prevent the Ottomans from attacking the walls from the sea. The vanguard of the Ottoman army arrived at the walls of Constantinople on April 1st, 1453, and began making camp the next day. The Sultan reached the city on the 5th of April and started preparing to besiege it.
I like how they have the big fucking gun, and it's just right there.
The giant Ottoman cannons were in place on the 6th and started blasting the Theodosian walls, but with little effect. The cannons were so massive they needed 3 hours to reload, and the Byzantines were able to repair the damage done to the walls.
Why would it take 3 hours to reload like one fucking cannon?
On the 7th, the Sultan ordered his light infantry and skirmishers to assault the walls, but the defenders easily repelled the Ottomans. Unfortunately for them, their biggest cannons were lost in the accident, and their smaller ones were not capable of doing much damage. The Byzantines attempted a few sallies on the 8th and 9th, but no positive results were achieved. The Ottomans started battering the city walls on the 11th, and this bombardment continued until the very end of the siege. On the 17th and the 18th, the Ottomans attempted night assaults, but the defenders held on. On the water, the Ottoman fleet was unable to penetrate the chain and move into the Golden Horn. On the contrary, a few Venetian ships arrived and joined the defenders on the 20th of April. The Sultan needed to employ a new strategy. He famously ordered his ships to be moved across land near the Genoese colony of Pera. The ships were then set to water in the Golden Horn behind the chain on April 28th. Constantine sent his fire ships to quickly get rid of this threat, but the defenders lost this battle. From now on, Constantine had to keep at least part of his troops on the northern wall, and that weakened his defences elsewhere.
Yep.
Some of the Byzantine cannons
Spelled
were
the
moved
doom
into
for
the
'em.
area, but they failed to defend the Allied ships, which had to return to the harbours. Their crews joined the defence. On May 6th, Ottoman cannons managed to destroy the gates of St. Romanus, and during the night their forces almost breached the defences in the area, but Giustiniani arrived and fended off the attackers.
Dang,
On the
close call.
11th, the Caligari gate was damaged, and the Ottomans moved in towards the Blacane Palace, but the emperor was able to push them back. The Ottoman Sultan commanded an all-out assault on the 29th. A massive bombardment was followed by a light infantry assault, but despite numerical advantage, they failed to take the walls from Giustiniani. Mehmed's artillery destroyed part of the gates near the gates of St. Romanus, and 3,000 Janissaries were sent to attack this position. The Byzantines were able to defend once again, but the Janissaries took one of the towers and planted the Ottoman flag. At this point, Giustiniani was heavily wounded and carried away from the battlements. This was a massive blow to the morale of the defenders, and when a few hundred Janissaries...
It's so amazing that despite all of this success that the Ottomans are having up until this point, like in terms of strategical advantage, like they have troops here, like they have the city surrounded, they've forced the Byzantines to defend another segment of the wall, which diverts forces from here, necessary forces from here, but it is still an extremely close fight. The Ottomans are still struggling to gain a foothold in the city.
entered
That's
the city near the gates
crazy.
of St. Romanus, the Byzantine defences fell. Citizens and defenders attempted to board the ships and leave the city. Sources say that the emperor and his last guards attempted a desperate counterattack near the gates of St. Romanus, but he was killed. Thus, the last Roman emperor died alongside his empire. The fall of Constantinople was the event that marked the end of the medieval era, sparked the next phase of the Renaissance, started the ages of discovery and colonization, and also centuries of wars between the European powers and the Ottoman Empire.
Yep.
The wars that we are planning to cover in the future.
You know what? I think
Thank you for watching our
This was well made. This was well made. I think they covered what they needed to cover. You know, of course, you can always go in more depth about the fucking fall of Constantinople. It is probably, arguably, the most famous siege in all of history. There are very few sieges that are, like, what, you have the fall of Constantinople, you have the siege of Stalingrad and Leningrad. Like, arguably, those, Stalingrad and Leningrad are probably more popular just because, you know, World War II is obviously fresh in our minds still after 70 years and the scale of World War II. But, you know, fall of Constantinople is definitely top 5. It's definitely top 5. But yeah, this was well made. I think they covered what they needed to do. I really enjoyed that beginning segment where they kind of spent the first like few minutes of this video bringing in context on, like, I guess the politics of the region, what was happening, Ottoman successes before the siege of Constantinople, you know, Hunyadi and Skanderbeg. I thought that was really a good choice. But yeah, that was the Fall of Constantinople 1453 Ottoman Wars documentary by Kings and Generals. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.